everyone, Bryan here, and you are joining me for our May Inner Circle call. Sorry we weren't able to do this live. I happened to be on the road. I was in California stirring up some trouble and giving a couple of days of lectures out there, and so I wasn't able to keep our regular scheduled time, but as promised, I told you I would be sending you the recorded call, and I have a real treat. I've got with me this afternoon Aaron Wiemeier. And Aaron, did that pronounce that right?
Oh, close. It's a big old German name, Wiemeier.
Wiemeier.
The I is silent
yeah.
in German. So.
All right. Well, okay. Mr. Aaron Wiemeier. And Aaron and I have been trying to get this interview scheduled for some time because I'm very excited about this workbook that he's created, which is it's just phenomenal. It's packed full of information. And so I got Aaron on the call, and let me tell you a little bit about Aaron before we dive in. Aaron is a licensed professional counselor and has been practicing in the Denver, Colorado area since 1998. He specializes in attachment, in trauma, and adoption. He uses a unique approach to connecting with children and families to help them deal with the brokenness of their lives. He wrote a workbook. It's called My Feelings Workbook, and he wrote it out of an understanding that many children, and most of my inner circle parents and professionals are going to find this very familiar, that many children he's working with, especially those who had experienced trauma, had poor understanding of true feelings and emotion, and that this was inhibiting their healing. So Aaron wrote this workbook in hopes that it will be used as a practical guide to help children and their families understand how and where they feel throughout the country. So that's awesome. Aaron, thanks for joining us for this Inner Circle call today.
Thanks a lot, Brian.
All right, let's start here. Now, how did you come to be a therapist, and why did you come to be a therapist? And tell me about your family growing up.
Oh, goodness. The therapy thing is kind of a little bit funny because when I was in graduate school, I went to graduate school in upstate New York in Albany. And when I was getting my graduate degree, I kind of told people that I really didn't have an interest in working with children, and I pretty much just wanted to work with adults. And then, lo and behold, it kind of turned around 180 degrees in the opposite direction. So when I first started, I was actually working at a brain injury center. And that's where I got a lot of the neurophysiology, a lot of the understanding of the brain, how the brain works, and just always had a passion for the brain and just fascinated by how it works and all that. And then in '98, I actually just, like a lot of people, was feeling the itch to kind of experience something different. And basically was a big-time skier and outdoors person, so I basically moved to Colorado and worked at a group home up there and really worked as a therapist. Brand new therapist, fresh out of grad school, gets worked by kids who've been in the system for a long period of time, and have a lot of fond memories and a lot of tough times. You learn pretty much on the job, and I had a good supervisor, and just through the years worked at treatment centers, and then eventually in '03 I left the treatment center, went into private practice, and just started to do a lot of community-based, a lot of intensive home-based work, a lot of adoption transitioning, a lot of attachment disorder work, and working with kids that were traumatized. So, and that's like the short snippet, but I just find it kind of interesting how in the very beginning, at least in my own head, I didn't really have a thought that I was going to work with kids. So it's kind of funny how that worked out. So,
now, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Syracuse, New York, upstate New York, right in the smack dab in the center.
You grew up in New York. Yeah, I've been up there in that area before. Very cold in the winter.
Oh, it's horrible.
Now,
they have like the second least amount of days of sunshine per year in the country outside of Seattle. So.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know that. That's big. Huh. Interesting. Now, how many siblings did you have?
I have two older sisters. So I'm 38, and my oldest is 42, and my middle sister is 40. So I'm the youngest I'm the young boy of three. So.
Oh, interesting. What did your mom and dad do when you were growing up?
My dad, he basically worked for a medical company when he was younger, but in the last 20 years or so, he's basically worked for life insurance. My mom was a dental hygienist for 20 years and then retired early and has been retired ever since. So, and they still live in Syracuse. My older sister lives in Tennessee, and she's got a big family, and and all that. And my nephew just came out. He's 19. He just came out here, and we showed him all what Colorado has to offer. So that was a good experience.
Cool. So working in the medical field is a little bit in your blood then.
Yeah, my grandmother was a nurse. My mother is obviously a dental hygienist, and so we have a little bit of that. In fact, when I was thinking of going to graduate school, one of the impetuses for that was remembering the story of some of the stuff my grandmother had done before I was born. But my mother used to tell me stories about some of the things that she did as a nurse, and that kind of intrigued me. So I think that helped prompt my idea to at least go into something in the pseudo-medical/mental health arena. So very
cool. Now let me ask you this: how did you get into the actual field of trauma work, trauma, attachment, adoption? How did that become kind of your area of specialization?
Well, I would say it started at the group home in '98. Most of those kids were coming out of a lot of the detention centers. They had been in, the system, been in and out of foster homes. A lot of them came from really tough family backgrounds, and they, at the time I was new in the field, and I didn't really understand necessarily what trauma was at the level I do now. But in working with them, you always understood that there was something behind, the behavior that they were showing on the surface. And so I think over the years I just started to really take in the supervision that I was given initially as a new counselor, and eventually went on to become more interested, and then went and got trained in EMDR, which I'm sure you're aware of what that is. That's just the trauma integration protocol, and got a lot more education there. And then, when I worked at treatment centers, continued to educate myself and learn about the brain and become trained and get supervised. And I think what happened is when hang
on just a minute. Let me interrupt you because you said something pretty interesting. You said that you always knew, or you come to always understand that there's something underneath the behavior. Where did that come from? Because was that supervision? Was that just experience? Because that's not really typical.
Yeah, I'd say it's a little of both. My first supervisor's name is Richard Modern. He's a therapist out here in Colorado. He was really good because he was very kind of a practical, reality-based therapist. And whenever I had a kid that would act out or, act out against me or do something that would get me kind of all reactive or upset, I was new as a therapist. I was human. I was learning. He would kind of pull me aside and try to help me understand what was underneath my reaction. Like, was it really just about that situation, or was it something about my past, my issues, my struggle?
Interesting.
And that's why I first learned it, and it really opened my eyes as a therapist. And what I think now is probably the most helpful thing you can understand as a therapist is yourself.
Oh yeah, I mean that's like starting off on the right track at the word go.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just that's amazing to have that opportunity. Because I think most therapists just kind of stumble along trying to figure it out until they finally meet someone who knows a little bit about what they're talking about.
Yeah.
So that's great. Well, good for you.
Thanks. Yeah.
And so you were saying?
I can't remember. I lost track, but.
You were working with kids in the group home as a part of how you were learning everything, and then. That's when we were talking about understanding those behaviors when I asked you how you got involved in attachment trauma work. And so you were just saying it's kind of a natural thing.
So with all that stuff, when you were, and then I left there and traveled and lived overseas for a while, but then came back and worked at a group home. And, in the group centers or the residential treatment centers, almost all of those kids, if not all of them, have some level of trauma in their life. So you get a lot of education there, a lot of understanding. You start to understand how, you get 3 or 4 or 5, 6 kids in the same environment, all who had trauma, and you watch them interact and play out their trauma through each other and the staff, and it's just a really good environment to see trauma, really how it works in terms of the system. And then in 2003 I left and went into private practice with a partner that I found here in Colorado. And, we just kind of took off. We started doing community-based work because nobody else was doing it. And I believe strongly, although I think there's a place for office-based work, I believe strongly with families, who have attachment issues or working through adoption and all that. I just feel very strongly that community-based work is the way to go. And so I started doing that, and we started, having success with that. And then the human service agencies in Denver started to notice, and they set up contracts with us. And then we just kept getting more and more referrals because, caseworkers were like, holy cow, a therapist who goes into the home and takes Medicaid. That's, amazing kind of stuff. And so that's kind of how it happened. And then I slowly slid into more and more of the adoption transitioning cases, more and more of the really hard attachment disorder cases where they're trying to move a kid into an adoptive home and the kid has a lot of, at least features of attachment disorder. And that's kind of how it happened.